Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's great to hang out with you again for another Video Creators Podcast episode. We're just all about helping you guys grow your YouTube audience so you can spread a message that reaches people and changes their lives. And today, we're going to talk about using storytelling to do that too. I have a guest with me here, Margot Leitman. How are you doing, Margot?
I'm great. How are you, Tim?
I'm good as well. It's great to talk with you. If you guys don't know who she is, I reached out to her because I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of learning personally on storytelling. And as YouTube creators, you guys know, like a lot of what we do is storytelling, whether you're vlogging, whether you're even doing like DIY tutorial, makeup, beauty, whatever, like you're still telling stories. Well, I think is this how you put mascara on? I think this is how it goes. But while you're doing like all that, like you're telling stories, and even the stories you tell around the products and maybe you're selling can make a big difference. And so I have been reading a lot, and I read Margot's book. She has a book. It's a best-selling book called Long Story Short, The Only Storytelling Guide You'll Ever Need. And I like it because it chopped everything up into like really manageable pieces, starting off with like just how to get started with storytelling, and then what are the elements of a story that you need to consider that make for a good story, and then also the performance of the story itself. So really good. I'll put a link to the show notes, link to that book in the show notes, or also to the description of this video, depending on wherever you're watching and you're listening to this, and you can find her book there. But Margot, you've done a ton of stuff on television, written for NBC, the Hallmark Channel. Your writings have appeared in Playgirl magazine, New York Press, Frisky.com, CollegeHumor.com, Lifetime TV. You've been 5-time winner of the Moth Story Slam, which I read your book, so I know what that is. But tell us, for people who don't know what the Story Slam is, what is that?
It's a storytelling competition that takes place all over. I think they do it internationally now as well, where people from the audience put their names in a hat and they draw 10 names. Usually there's way more than 10 names in the hat, up to 40 or 50. And then whomever gets chosen gets up to tell a story with no notes on the topic. Let's say the topic is dating or something. Oh, wow. And then after you tell the story, you get judged and scored like it's gymnastics. And then there's a winner, and then the winner from that goes on to compete against all the former winners in something called the Grand Slam, and then there's one giant winner from all of that.
And so you're the giant winner of all of that from all those?
I was once the giant winner of all of that, yes.
Cool. And in the New York City one, you received a score of a perfect 10?
Yeah, so when I was the giant, as we're calling it, the giant winner of all of that, it was because my score got a perfect 10, which I guess, is that Nadia Comaneci in gymnastics got that? I don't know. So I'm like the Nadia Comaneci of storytelling.
That's awesome. So you've done a lot of, you've co-hosted long-running, nationally touring strip stories.
That was a storytelling show I did with my friend, yeah. And we told stories all around the country in this show, and we had a really amazing run with it. Yeah.
Cool. And NPR as well, and Good Food, and a lot of different podcasts. Yeah. Now you can say you've been on the Video Creators Podcast, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm really excited to talk with you about this. Just tell us real quick before we start talking about storytelling professionally as a creator, and just how did you get involved in storytelling? Which is kind of your story?
Through stand-up comedy. I was doing stand-up first for a while, about 6 years, and then eventually I started to not want to do it anymore, and I would have shows booked, but I just didn't want to go to them. And so one night I got on stage, instead of telling my stand-up set that I prepared, I just told a true story from my life. And I had this amazing response, and it was basically the response I've been looking for in years of stand-up, like the way that people laughed and the way that people took to it and the way that people were listening. And I thought, is there a way I could do this instead? And then I started forging my own path. And I always think about that line in the, and I'm butchering it right now, but that line in the movie The Social Network where they say Harvard graduates they don't get great jobs, they create great jobs, or something like to that effect. Right. But I always think about that, of how I kind of had to create a career around this once I figured out what I wanted to do. And there was nothing that existed that was, you can be a storytelling teacher and a live storyteller. I had to build that path. And I feel like that's a lot of the direction that our world is going in.
Yeah.
Creating jobs.
it's such a human thing to be able to tell and hear and enjoy stories. It's like built into fact. Like you have entire courses in school called history, which is like, unfortunately, all told really dry, boring ways, like a bunch of lists of facts. But like we love listening to people who tell good stories. The YouTube channels that do really well are often people who have gotten really good at honing their craft of storytelling. Networking events, we all love hanging out with people who tell good stories and like working with those types of people. It's just one of those things that like I feel like almost everyone needs to like develop this skill just for whatever profession you're in.
From a YouTube standpoint, recently I moved into this new house about 6 weeks ago, and on the day that I was moving, I also have a very young baby, and I had a stroller, and I didn't know how to compact the stroller to fit it into what we were moving over to the new house, from the old house to the new house, and I didn't know how to do it, and we were in a rush to get there, and the babysitter and I were trying to figure it out, and we couldn't get it to fold, and I was like, well, let's find out on YouTube how to fold up this model of the stroller.
There you go.
I tell you, we watched 4 different videos that were like really slow and couldn't get to the point, and they were taking too long to tell me, and I was like, I just need to fold up my stroller and put it in the car. So finally we found this guy, and I think his name was Gary, and he was like this older gentleman who's a grandpa with a mustache, and we found him with the stroller, and he goes, hey guys, if you're like me, you're really frustrated with the stroller, right? Let me show you how to do it. And then he was like, and I was like, Gary, thank you. But he said something like, if you're like me, you're frustrated, you can't fold up your daughter's stroller, I can't get the kids out of the house, here's how you do it. And I was so, but he told a story in 10 seconds, and then he told me why I couldn't do it. He told me he felt frustrated, and then he showed me how to do it, and he was the only person that could solve our problem, including the makers of the strollers instructions on their website.
Yeah, and what it did for you is you instantly formed like a connection with that guy because of that story, because his story was also your story, and you're both like, oh, yes, mutual connection, I
was super frustrated in that moment. I was so frustrated. And I also was like, and then I thought about my dad, and I was like, my poor dad, if I asked him to fold this up, he would be so frustrated, just like this guy. It was great, the babysitter and I still laugh about that guy. He was great.
So do you watch a lot of YouTube personally yourself, or what do you do on YouTube?
It depends. Like I do watch a lot of live storytelling, like people telling personal stories at stage shows online. I do a lot, and I research a lot, and I listen to good ones. I mean, obviously when you have kids, you watch a lot of stuff on YouTube to entertain them and such. But those are the 2 things I watch the most of, and then I do a lot of instructional stuff on there when I'm stuck, because of losing manuals or what have you.
Changing like dishwasher. We just bought a new dishwasher, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna save myself $120 and install this myself instead of paying the plumber to do it. So, all right, YouTube, here we go. So exactly that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, have you heard of a guy named Olin Rogers on YouTube by any chance?
No.
Okay, I love that guy. It's not really supposed to be a plug for him right now, but he's one of the guys that first got me interested in this storytelling skill related to YouTube, because he has like a show on Nickelodeon, I think, and out in Hollywood. It started on his YouTube channel, and it's just him sitting on his bed in his apartment, just telling stories. No props, no like visuals or anything, just him sitting on his bed. He's got like 1 million something subscribers now, I think, just based on oral storytelling. And his stories are hilarious. I love them. I binge watch him every once in a while. I go back and just catch up on everything and spend an hour. Great. And for me, like when I discovered him years ago, I was like, this is how storytelling should be. Like no props, not like you don't need a lot of fancy visual effects or anything, like just good old plain fashion storytelling. And now that we can use video to complement that should make the story even like better. So just for him, just sitting on his bed telling stories that engaged a lot of people, and including myself. And now he's gone on to do things with Nickelodeon and a lot of traditional media stuff. Which, depending on who you are, you're listening to this, you might say that's a step down or a step up, depending how you look at it. But there is a lot of value to learning how to do this. So what I want to talk with you about Margot, as we go through this, is help us as creators be able to tell better stories and to engage our audiences with the stories that we're telling, to spread the messages that we have, that we're passionate about it, about spreading and changing people's lives through them. So, in your opinion, having worked with so many people in this niche, what are some of those like important? Why is that such an important skill for someone to learn how to tell stories? In case anyone's not yet convinced.
Well, there's literally no downside in being able to tell a story properly. With most things, there are ups and downs with it, but there's only good that can come from that. So in order to tell, if you can tell a good story, people want to be around you. And then if people want to be around you, then people want to work with you. And then people want to work with you, your career moves forward. So there's that. Mm-hmm. If you can tell a good story, you can connect with people on a deeper level quite quickly. If you can speak about yourself in an open manner, which then breeds friendships, which then breeds romantic connections. So it's like in every aspect of your life, social, professional, emotional, the connection that you build with people via sharing your own stories will only propel your life forward in a positive direction. Yeah. I think that came from me observing often that, when I was single and I was dating, there was somebody just asked me, like, didn't you go out with such and such a long time ago? I said, yeah. And they said, why didn't it last? And I said, well, I just felt like he wasn't very open, and I just felt like there was nothing sincere there. And it felt like, so I walked away after a couple dates. And then I feel like, well, professionally, that must be the same thing. If there feels like there's nothing there, why would anyone want to continue that relationship or move forward with the person in a company as well? So I think it all comes forward. So once I observed that I didn't like that in other people, I started being more open, sometimes to a fault, and I admit that, but, and sharing my own experiences and connecting with people that way. And I think that I have better relationships in every aspect of my life, professionally and personally, because of it. Yeah.
I've heard many top YouTube creators, you guys, talk about like when they're asked like, so how did you grow your YouTube channel to 8 million subscribers, and how did you become popular? And they're like, you know what? Like a lot of creators, they focus on gear. It's like, okay, I need to get a better camera. I need to get a better microphone. I need to, use better keywords and tags in my videos, and all those things are important. Sure. But what all the top people say is it's all about the story. It's all about crafting a story that people care about, that get them emotionally engaged, and a story that people feel like they connect with, and they want to watch, they want to see what happens, and they want to become a part of that story. And so a lot of vloggers, like who just come to YouTube and they're like, I'm just going to vlog my life and tell my story. A lot of them get really frustrated because they're like, well, it looks like on the outside, like that other creator is doing the exact same thing that you're doing from like a technical aspect, like you're using the same gear, same equipment, but then it's easy to get frustrated because like, why is my channel not growing and theirs is, and we're doing the same thing? Well, often it come down to certain things with branding and things, but even branding comes down to the story that your company or channel is telling through that brand, right? So even branding is ultimately storytelling. So what I think learning from people like Margot is just really valuable for us to learn. How do we tell better stories? Even tutorial DIY type of things, or telling stories about the product or about the solution or the problem that we have in our life, or why we're looking for this in the first place. Like Margot, you gave a perfect example of that. It's just really important. So,
and also sincerity and passion will go far. So if someone's sincere, being sincere about the product that they're doing, or if they're doing makeup tutorials because they're so passionate about makeup, then that comes through. But if they're doing makeup tutorials because they hear those get a lot of hits, that's not going to go anywhere for you. Right. Yeah. And if you look at the people that are really huge in that space, they do have a passion for it, and that will drive you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of those common mistakes you see people making when they're telling a story, like whether it's on YouTube or just professionally or personally or on dates or whatever? What are some of those common mistakes?
I mean, the big thing is taking forever to get to your point. Get right to your point and nail it quickly. I think that is, I always say to people in your intro to a story, and I mean story in the bigger picture, only give intro as pertain to the story you are about to tell. So again, going back to like Gary and his stroller, if you're like me, I'm frustrated with I can't fold my daughter's stroller. That's it. That's the story he's about to tell. But the mistake people make is, hi, I'm Gary. I'm 67 years old. I live in Omaha. I used to work for Shell Gasoline. Now I'm retired. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, I don't care. I just want to know what's going on right now as pertaining to the story you are about to tell, right? So that's the big mistake I see, is I see these really grandiose openings that have nothing to do with what you're about to say. So your story, your opening needs to be quick as pertains to what you're going to say. You'll have plenty of other times to tell your life story. And then another thing is that I think that people make exclusive statements at the top of their stories instead of inclusive statements. So you can't exclude people with what you're going to say. And like exclusive statements are things like, my life is so crazy. Something like that is exclusive because it makes the audience go, well, her life is crazier than mine. I don't have an interesting life. How am I going to relate to this person? But if you are inclusive in what you say at the beginning, something to the effect of like, I don't know, maybe something like, I've always struggled with my weight. So now something like that is something that most people can tap into, whether they have or not, and whatever level everyone has had, about with that. So you have to figure out what would be inclusive, not exclusive at the very top, because I believe people make decisions. This is same for YouTube and IRL, is that you make decisions quickly whether or not you like and you're on board with someone. And if you're out, you're out.
It reminds me, a few years ago, I worked with a A-list celebrity in Hollywood who is just starting out on YouTube. And this person wasn't doing very well, despite, like on television, she'll draw 4 million people instantly to any show she's on. But on YouTube, she was maxing out at like 2,000 or 3,000 views per video. And so I'm in this studio right across from Universal Studios in Hollywood with her, and my wife's actually interviewing her on her show. And I was like, something is just not right. Like, she's talking to that camera like it's a television camera, not to a YouTube camera. And I couldn't figure it out. And then, like, kind of what you just said is kind of the principle I discovered in that moment, which was when she talks to the television camera, she's like, hey guys, I have an amazing thing that you need to know about, and it's coming up right after this. But on YouTube, it's more like, hey guys, how you doing? So good to see you again. Man, I have something like really awesome I want to share with you, but how are you doing? Like, comment below. It was like way more personable human connection, like rather than like just broadcasting like, hey, you guys should care about me because I'm awesome, I'm on TV. Like, YouTube is like a different storytelling thing completely. And unfortunately, she never got that in this case, and so she's no longer on YouTube anymore and back to doing her normal television stuff, which is great. But the way you open up and make it feel inclusive, make the viewer feel like you're talking with them, like it's a conversation or it's something they can identify with.
Well, the thing is, people say to me a lot after I tell a story on stage is that I feel like I know you. I feel like we would have been friends in high school or what have you, and that's a successful story, is if someone says that to you afterwards. And I think those people, public figures that we tap into, is because we feel like we know them, and it's because they've effectively told their story to make us feel that way. And I'm not trying to make this anything political, but George W. Bush, they always joked, was the president you'd want to have a beer with, and that's why he became president. Now, George W. Bush was publicly a recovering alcoholic. He wasn't drinking a beer with anyone. You know what I'm saying? And he convinced the country that he was the president you could have a beer with by his personality, and got elected twice. So if you really think about how far that can take you, that was like a narrative that he conveyed with his personality, which was a pretty charming personality, So you think about things and how far that can take you, and the story that you can tell by being approachable and making someone feel like, I could be friends with this person, and where can that take you? I mean, it can take you all the way to the Oval Office, Yeah. It can also take you to more YouTube viewers on a smaller scale.
Absolutely. You did that in your book, Long Story Short, as well. You have a lot of personal stories in there, and then use them as examples for storytelling. And in there, you the ones that stand out to me right now, the ones you're telling about your experiences at camp when you were growing up. And so I was a camp counselor, as a camp director. I was also a camper growing up, and like I really identify with those stories. And someone tweeted me, I think as you saw, asking me where I was at with my storytelling books I've been reading and things. I recommended yours. It's my favorite one so far. because not only did you use stories to teach about storytelling, but that human connection. I was like, I feel like I have some sort of like connection with Margot, even though we've never talked, never met. You have no idea who I am, besides just like a few tweets and maybe, right. And that's what we're doing basically as YouTube creators is we're doing the same thing. We're talking to an audience just like you did in your book, but we're doing it through video. And people feel like when they meet us at like VidCon or at some of these like big YouTube events where all the fans come, they cry because they're like, I'm just meeting you, but I feel like we're best friends, even though obviously the creator has no idea who the person is. It's those parasocial relationship things, but because of the stories that these creators are telling, they have such a personal connection with their audience, which is really powerful. You can use that to do a lot of good in the world, mobilize an audience, and do a lot of amazing things. Absolutely. Any other common mistakes that people make?
No, those were the ones that I wrote down as like the big ones. Yeah. Okay.
So another thing that I know because you talk about this in your book too, is one of the things that works really well on YouTube is when people just naturally integrate their personal stories into their content, and I try to do that with my content, even tutorial content, like your video creators. Like, guys, one thing I've really been struggling with is trying to figure out this new content strategy, blah blah blah. Talk a little bit about my struggle, and then get into teaching about it a little bit. A lot of people. And I've heard this from many people. They're like, I would love to tell stories in my content or vlog or something, but I just don't feel like I have anything interesting to say. Like, nothing. My life is boring, So how can people go about discovering what stories are in their life that would actually be good to share and could also be stories worth telling?
I think you have to pay attention to what people in your social life are responding to. So if you find that socially there's something that people are laughing at often or asking you to tell a lot, then that's a story worth expanding on. If there's something that gets a response, whether that's a response of like, or any sort of vocal thing, laughter, gasping, like, ugh, whatever that may be, screaming, that shows that there's an excitement around this and that there's a story that's worth telling. But when people say your stories aren't interesting enough, that's not true, because passion drives a story. So if you feel strongly about a story and it affected you in some way, then someone listening will feel strongly. You just need to care. So if you don't care about your own stories, then you can't expect anyone else to care. Sure. But if there's something that happened to you that you really care about, other people will care. You just have to tap into what's relatable about that to others. And again, keep it inclusive. And so what you just said, like when you tell your stories online and you say, one of the things I've been really struggling with is blank. That's such an inviting way to get people in to feel like they also have a story to share, because people bond over seeing someone that they look up to admitting that they have struggles, and then they go, well, what have I struggled with? And then from there, there's a story to tell. Like every time a celebrity comes out and talks about something that they've struggled with, I applaud them, because I think that is such a great way to connect and help others. So again, it's like the big things I would say for people to think about when they're thinking about that their stories don't matter is like, what have I struggled with and overcome? People can relate to that. What do I feel strongly about? What really affected me? What do I have passion for? What's relatable? And from those things, there has to be stories within your life that are worth telling for sure.
Yeah. So then do you, like if someone wants to keep track of those stories and make videos about them later, you recommend just like having a document that you would keep track of?
I'm very into, I think many storytellers will tell you that it's a pretty, what's the word? Analog? No. What's it when you use pen and paper? What's the technical term?
Offline? Like analog version?
Some sort of fancy word for it. But
old school?
Old school. We'll say old school for now. Tonight I'm going to shoot up in bed and be like, it's called this. Yeah. But we're really into journaling. If I honestly, you want to see my dad? This is the other side. You can't see it, but here. This is my dad.
There you go. Yep, exactly. Lots of paper, books, and stacks of stuff.
I write by hand. I also find that you don't judge it or edit it as much when you're writing by hand. You don't expect it to be perfect. You have more fun, and then you can from that do what you will with it. But there's a lot of fun ways to I don't know. I get really into pens. It becomes a fun thing to write things down. And so that's how I keep track of things, for sure. I don't in a document. But maybe that's not how people's minds work. But that's not how most storytellers tend to do it, pen and paper.
So when you have a life story that happened, and you notice someone's laughing out loud about it, you're like, ooh, that would be a good story to. Yeah. So you just quickly jot a few notes down to remind you of the story.
Yeah. Well, mostly that happens to me when I'm teaching, because I teach people storytelling. And often I'll be in a class and I'll be teaching a class, and then so that will inspire something from my own life. When somebody else tells a story, I'll go, oh my gosh, that reminds me of something happening in third grade. And I'll just write down like third grade embarrassing Halloween or whatever. Right. And I'll write that down for later, and then I'll develop it. But yeah, I write it down in the moment. It'll be gone if you don't.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So story follows a certain structure that I've been learning a lot about lately. And so if someone's just starting out for the first time now, thinking about storytelling, what kind of structure or process or something could they follow to kind of be able to start crafting better stories right from the very beginning?
So a good structure I like is you start with, again, very brief intro as pertains to the particular story you're about to tell. The body of your story should be something that changed or affected you in some way. There has to be so you have to look at the story and go, who I am at the beginning, who am I at the end? And if you're the same person, it's not a story worth telling, right? So there has to be a change within you. So again, small intro, tell a story that changes or affected you in some way. That story should have conflict, whether it's inner or exterior. It should build to some sort of climax. There should be a resolution and a brief conclusion. And for me, personally, I prefer that conclusion does not include telling me what you've learned at the end of the day. I'd rather your story speak for itself and not have like a big, heavy-hitting moral. Let the audience interpret their own moral. And then I tend to try and end on a laugh, if you can.
Yeah. Okay. So I've heard story arcs and story structures and things before, and there's a good video on YouTube called Every Story Has a Shape or something like that, and that was helpful for me. But the book I read right before yours is Creativity Inc. by the president of Pixar, where he just tells a lot of stories. But he said that same thing in there, and then when I read your book, it all kind of clicked, which was the stories that we care about have meaning. Like, they're not just stories about what you ate for dinner that day and then that you had a hard time falling asleep or something like a lot of vloggers would do on YouTube. But instead, the vlogs, the storytellers, that there's a meaning behind it. And so every Pixar film we really love has like a big, like you said, like a big meaning, a big, use a different word also. But
universal theme.
Yeah, something to it that we can all identify with and be like, that is true. And, and so that's what you're saying. So when I'm doing my family vlogs now, I'm trying to think more intentionally, like I could tell just like report on our day, that's one way to tell a story. It's not very interesting. Or I could like, what is the point of the story that happened today? And like you said, not maybe call out like, so boys and girls, the thing we learned today is blah, 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 but instead like give the story some meaning about like what our family's going through or what our family's learning together or the challenges we face right now is, my wife's pregnant with baby number 7. There's lots of challenges, So trying to get more into the meaning of it is something I've been thinking a lot about now since your book.
I look back on every story I work on and I go, what is this story really about? And if I can't answer that, then it's not time to tell that story yet. So I look at everything and go, like, what's the bigger picture here? What's the real story that I'm telling? Is this a story about resilience? Is this a story about self-doubt? What is this really a story about? It may be a story about going shopping, but what is it really about deep down?
Right. Yeah. So after we've tried practicing some of the structure stuff that you mentioned, how can we evaluate to know like if we're doing well, if we're doing bad, how we should improve?
The big thing like I see constantly is people come into class with a written piece at the time, but at the end of each class I teach you're writing stories by the end of it. And students come in and I'll say, well, I wanted to hear more about your mom. Why isn't that in there? And they'll go, well, I cut that. And I go, well, who told you to cut that? You hadn't even presented it to anybody yet. You're making edits to this thing based on self-doubt. I mean, the big thing is I write everything, and then I think it sucks. And then I leave it alone for a few days. And I come back and I read it a few days later, and it's brilliant. It just took a day or two for me to like let go of the self-doubt. And self-doubt will kill you. There's a great book, The War of Art. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's worth reading about all of that, all of those voices in your head. But so I usually don't do too much to it until it's in front of an audience, and I let an audience, reaction to tell me what I should tweak or what I should have more of. And even if the audience's reaction isn't so great, I certainly don't throw it away and never do it again. I work on it. But, present it to somebody you trust. When I did acting, there was a mistake I noticed a lot of people do or friends would get their professional acting headshot done. And, you get like 200 different shots to choose from and from the photo shoot. And they'll put like all of them on Facebook to their 1,000 friends and go, which shot is the best? And every person's going to say something different, and then you're not going to get an answer, right? So what you need to do is bring it to a trusted person, possibly someone in the industry that can go, this is the shot, and then it's over. You see what I mean? So the people do that with their stories is they present them to everybody. Everybody's got something else to say. And instead you should present them to one person or so that has a valued opinion and then put it on stage. So yeah.
Okay, so in YouTube world, that could be like this is what my wife and I do. We usually do it beforehand. Like we sit down at the beginning of the day before we shoot our vlog that day, and we're like, "What's the story we're telling today? What's going on? What do you got in your schedule? What's on my schedule? Okay, you're going grocery shopping. Oh, you're taking the kids. Oh, okay. Well, let's make this a story about how a mom of 6 goes grocery shopping with 6 little kids and
how does
kind
she?
of
What's
chaos." Well, that's a whole video you should watch, actually.
You want a credit them all?
Do grocery shopping. She's had to do that a few times. Now we're changing that. We're going to do more grocery shopping online. But we actually got a sponsorship where they're going to provide groceries for us in exchange for doing videos about shopping online.
You need that with that many kids. You certainly do.
But that's it. Like we try to figure out the story ahead of time rather than like making a video of everything we do that day and at the end trying to edit it into something that makes sense. And
that goes from broad stage storytelling is that a lot of people want to get on stage and just start talking. It's the same thing like what you're saying, and like it really does help to have some work done ahead of time. Same as what you're saying.
So my wife and I have the ability to kind of bounce off each other a little bit of like, here's the story that's happening today. But what you're talking about is more like hindsight, like how do I craft the story? And that's what I feel like maybe I'm missing is maybe with my wife, because we already shot it. And now we're like, okay, in hindsight, what can we learn from how we told the story so that we shoot tomorrow's video, we do a better job with the next one and how we tell the story than we did in this one. And that's something we don't do. So we should probably evaluate that. So that's good.
And also, but it's good to keep moving forward though, like whatever mistakes you made, don't harp on them too much. Tomorrow's another day. You can always do better. And life goes on. I have a lot of people harp on a bad performance or a story that didn't go well, and they want to study it and figure it out forever. And it's like, let it go. Make notes in your script of what did and didn't work, and move on and make it better. But like, don't wallow in something not going well, because create any sort of art, whether it's on online YouTube videos or on stage, whatever that is, there's going to be some failures. And if there isn't, then you're not really putting enough work out there.
Right. Well, in some ways, I think as a creator, we actually have an advantage to learning how to tell stories, because when you're in person telling a story, people can still make eye contact with you and not be listening to a word you're saying. Right? But on YouTube, we have these things called audience retention graphs, which you can see exactly when your audience abandons the video, if they skip forward to a different section, if they go back and listen to a section twice or 3 times, multiple times. So you can see exactly how your audience is engaging with the content. And I think that's a very valuable tool for us as creators to use to see, okay, in this part of the story, everyone abandoned it right here. Why did that happen? What happened? Like, what's going on? Like, so my wife and I have discovered in our videos, if either one of us talk for more than 12 seconds without making a cut or showing some sort of B-roll on top, audience retention starts to drop. They don't want to just see us talk. They want to like hear the story, but also see the story happening. If we ramble for too long.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's major principle that you just said, is that you have to be able to see the story. You can't just hear it.
Right.
So when you're telling a story, in oral storytelling, what I work in, is people often just tell the story, and I said, I need to see that. So they'll say to me, my date walked in and he looked really handsome. I don't know what that means to you. I know what handsome is to me, but to you, the storyteller, it may be somebody different. And she may say he walked in and looked really handsome. He had, long hair down to his waist and no shirt on. Maybe that's what this person likes, but like that I can see, because all I know is my interpretation of a word, and so I need to really see that.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm out. So, I mean, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. We've learned also that like fading music in too soon can maybe send a signal to the viewer that the video is over or the story is approaching the end, even though it's really not. So a lot of those things you guys as creators can learn just by paying attention to those audience retention graphs and looking for patterns. I worked with one guy, this is a while back, but when we discovered that whenever he would say the word module in his videos, people would just like abandon his videos. And all he did was stop saying the word module, and people started watching longer, started getting more watch time, videos start performing better overall, so it's not as always cut and dry as that. But there is a lot to learn from how to tell better stories just based on how people engage and watch your videos. So recommend you guys check that out in your YouTube analytics and study maybe your past 20 videos and look for those patterns in them through that. Any other resources that you would recommend for people?
So I mentioned the War of Art. I think it's good for any sort of doubt that you're having in your head. I had a writing teacher in New York City that wrote a great book called Writing from Personal Experience by Nancy Davidoff-Kelton, which I think it's another good book to help you learn this style. It's not really necessarily for oral storytelling, it's more for memoir writing, but it's still in the same field. I would read some memoir personal stories, specifically from David Sedaris, who's the living master of storytelling right now. Or you can watch some of his stuff on YouTube, or you can read some of his books or listen to the audiobooks specifically. I think that you can learn so much by a living legend, and he's basically, I think, the greatest living storyteller we have right now.
David Sedaris, is that his name?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sederis, cool. Yeah. And then I would listen to storytelling podcasts. There's tons of them. And go to themoth.org. And they are, this leading storytelling nonprofit that has tons of resources on there as well. And read my book. Yeah,
absolutely. I will put links to all that stuff in the show notes, guys, or if you're listening to the podcast, or if you're watching the video on YouTube, it's in the description below. To her book, long story short, the only storytelling guide you'll ever need. So I guess that's the only book we really need to talk about here, apparently. And it is good. Obviously, I really liked it. I enjoyed it.
It's a really, it's a lot to live up to in the title, but let me tell you, it worked. People bought it.
Yeah. I liked it. I have a long list of other books to read too, but so far yours is my favorite.
The only one you'll ever need is mine, so I don't know why.
That's true. Yeah, I should just stop right now. Mission accomplished. So if people want to connect with you, where would they go if they want to learn more about what you're up to?
Margot Leitman on Twitter, or at Margot Leitman on Facebook, or at Margot Leitman on Instagram. Yeah.
Great. I'll put links to all those in the show notes and description as well for you guys to find her if you want to connect with her yourself. And
I have stories on YouTube as well.
Yes, I did. I watched some of your channel. My wife and I did. It was fun. So I'd love to hear from you guys, whether it's in the comments here or you want to tweet us at Tim Schmoyer, where I'm at Twitter. But what principles about storytelling have you found have worked really well for you on a YouTube specific context? And what recommendations and advice would you give to other creators who are trying to improve their storytelling abilities and skills through their videos and business professions and everything? So looking forward to hearing from you guys down below. And if this is your first time here, would love to have you subscribe. We got new podcast episodes for you guys every Tuesday in iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play, just to help you guys be able to better grow your audiences and engage the people who are listening to your stories, and hopefully do so to spread a message that reaches them and changes their life. So thank you for letting me and Margot be a part of that with you guys here today. Subscribe, and we'll catch up with you guys again next week. See ya.
Thanks, you. Bye.